I was 6 months pregnant with Adalbert's child when he married my sister Lieselot in the chapel where we were supposed to exchange our vows. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt the sting of betrayal from someone you trusted with your entire heart, stay with me until the end. And tell me the city you are watching from so that I can send you a hug. You're not alone in this. My name is Gretchen, and this is the story of how the man I loved chose my own sister over me while I carried the one thing his ancient bloodline desperately needed to survive. But what he didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that the child growing inside me held a secret that would change everything. It started on a frost-covered morning in October, when Adalbert von Reichenberg first walked into my father's medical practice in the old district of our town. He wasn't there for himself. He was there for his mother, Kunigund, who had been struggling with a rare blood disorder that had plagued the von Reichenberg family for generations. My father, Dr. Friedrich Hoffmann, was one of the few physicians in Austria who specialized in hereditary conditions, and the von Reichenbergs had exhausted every other option. I remember the exact moment I saw Adalbert. I was organizing patient files in the reception area, my hands dusty with the powder from old paper, when he pushed through the heavy oak door. Snowflakes clung to his dark coat, and his eyes, those piercing gray eyes, scanned the room with an intensity that made my breath catch. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a kind of presence that commanded attention without effort. But it wasn't just his appearance that struck me. It was the weight he seemed to carry, the responsibility etched into every line of his face. Our eyes met for perhaps 3 seconds, but in those seconds, something shifted in the air between us. I felt it in my chest, that strange pull that you read about in novels but never quite believe exists in real life. He nodded politely, and I managed to direct him to my father's office, my voice somehow steady despite the sudden racing of my heart. Over the following months, Adalbert became a regular presence at the practice. His mother's treatments required frequent visits, and gradually, our brief exchanges at the reception desk evolved into longer conversations. He would arrive early for appointments and linger afterward, asking me about my studies. I was completing my certification in medical administration, and sharing stories about his family's estate in the countryside, about the weight of being the last male heir in a bloodline stretching back centuries. The von Reichenbergs weren't just any family. They were descendants of minor Austrian nobility, their name linked to land grants from the Habsburg era, their legacy preserved in crumbling documents and fading portraits. But that legacy was dying. Adalbert's mother was ill with the same condition that had killed her father and grandfather before him. Adalbert's younger brother, Leopold, had died of it at 17. The von Reichenberg bloodline was cursed, Adalbert told me one evening as we sat in the practice's small garden, watching the sun set over the distant mountains. He needed an heir, he explained, but not just any heir. He needed a child who might somehow break the pattern, who might carry the bloodline forward without the genetic curse that haunted his family. My father had become not just Kunigund's doctor but the family's confidant, spending hours researching the genetic markers of their condition, searching for answers in medical journals from around the world. And somewhere in those months of Adalbert's visits, somewhere between medical discussions and shared cups of coffee, between walks through the autumn leaves and whispered conversations in the practice's quiet corners, I fell in love with him. Completely. Irreversibly. The kind of love that consumes you, that makes you believe you found the person you were always meant to find. Adalbert felt it too. I know he did. I could see it in the way he looked at me, the way his voice softened when he said my name, the way his hand would reach for mine when we thought no one was watching. By December he had told me he loved me. By January we were planning our future together. He wanted to marry me, he said, to build a life with me, to have children with me who might finally break the curse on his family. My father was cautiously supportive. He had grown fond of Adalbert during their many consultations, and he truly believed, that with the right genetic testing and medical intervention, there was hope for healthy children. We began the process of genetic counseling, of understanding my own DNA profile, of mapping out the possibilities for our future offspring. And then my sister came home. Lieselot had been studying art history in Vienna for 3 years. She was 24, 2 years younger than me, And she had always been the beautiful one, the charming one, the one who could walk into a room and make everyone turn their heads. Where I was practical and studious, Lieselot was artistic and magnetic. Where I was comfortable in the shadows, she needed the spotlight the way flowers need sun. I hadn't seen her in months when she arrived home that February, supposedly for a brief visit before returning to Vienna for her final semester. She burst into our family home like a whirlwind, full of stories about galleries and exhibitions, about the sophisticated life she was building in the capital. My mother fussed over her, my father beamed with pride, and I welcomed her with genuine happiness. I had missed my sister, despite our differences, despite the subtle competition that had always existed between us. I made the mistake of telling her about Adalbert that first evening. We sat in my bedroom like we used to as children, and I couldn't contain my joy. I told her everything about how we had met, how he had pursued me, how we were planning to marry in the spring, how we were working with my father to ensure we could have healthy children despite his family's genetic condition. I showed her the ring Adalbert had given me, a delicate band with a small sapphire that had belonged to his grandmother. Lieselot's eyes widened as I spoke. She asked question after question, seeming fascinated by every detail. What did he look like? Where was his estate? How wealthy was his family? What exactly was this genetic condition? Could it really be overcome? I answered everything openly, trusting her the way sisters should trust each other. I even showed her a photograph of Adalbert that I kept on my nightstand. Him standing beside his mother, both of them dressed formally for some family event, the von Reichenberg estate visible in the background. That was my first mistake. My second was introducing them. Adalbert had invited me to dinner at a restaurant in the city center the following week, and at the last minute, Lieselot asked if she could join us. She wanted to meet the man who had captured her sister's heart, she said with a smile that seemed warm and genuine. I hesitated for just a moment. Something in my gut whispered a warning, but then I dismissed it as silly jealousy. Lieselot was my sister. I loved her. Why shouldn't she meet the man I was going to marry? So I brought her along, and I watched as Adalbert's expression changed when she walked into the restaurant. Lieselot had always known how to dress, how to style her hair, how to present herself in a way that demanded attention. That night she wore a deep burgundy dress that complemented her complexion perfectly. Her blonde hair swept up elegantly, her movements graceful and deliberate. I saw the way Adalbert's eyes followed her as she approached our table. I saw the slight falter in his greeting to me as he stood to shake her hand. I saw how the conversation shifted, how Lieselot's laugh filled the spaces between my words, how her stories about Vienna's art scene seemed to captivate him in a way my medical practice anecdotes never had. But I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself that of course Adalbert would be polite and attentive to my sister. I told myself that his love for me was real, that the months we had spent together meant something, that the ring on my finger was a promise he intended to keep. Over the next few weeks, Lieselot extended her stay at home. She kept finding reasons not to return to Vienna. A professor had postponed her final critique. She wanted to spend more time with our aging parents. She was considering transferring her studies. And somehow, she kept appearing wherever Adalbert and I were. She would join us for walks, showing up at the park where we usually met as if by coincidence. She would come to the medical practice during Adalbert's mother's appointments, bringing coffee and pastries and sitting with us in the waiting room. She would be at our house when Adalbert came to discuss treatment plans with my father, inserting herself into conversations about art that the von Reichenberg family collected, about the history of their estate, about society events she thought he should attend. I watched as something shifted in Adalbert. The way he looked at me began to change, or perhaps it didn't change at all, and I was simply seeing clearly for the first time. His touches became less frequent. His kisses felt perfunctory. Our conversations grew shorter, more clinical, focused almost entirely on his mother's treatment and the genetic testing we were undergoing. And he began to look at Lieselot the way he used to look at me. I confronted her one night, finding her alone in the kitchen after another dinner where she had monopolized Adalbert's attention. I asked her directly if she had feelings for him, if she was trying to come between us. She looked at me with wide, innocent eyes and laughed, calling me paranoid. She was just being friendly, she said. She was just trying to get to know the man who was going to be her brother-in-law. Was I really so insecure that I couldn't handle my sister being nice to my fiancé? Her words made me doubt myself. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe my own insecurities about not being as beautiful as her, about not being as interesting as her, were making me see threats where none existed. Adalbert loved me. He had told me so. We were planning our wedding for May, just 3 months away. But then came the night that shattered everything. It was March, unseasonably warm, with the first hints of spring in the air. Adalbert had asked to meet me at the practice after hours to discuss the latest genetic test results. My father had gone home, the building was empty, and I waited for Adalbert in my father's office, reviewing the documents that suggested, miraculously, that my genetic profile was actually favorable. There was a strong possibility that any children I had with Adalbert would not inherit the von Reichenberg curse. The news was everything we had been hoping for. I was smiling as I organized the papers, imagining Adalbert's relief, imagining our future together suddenly free of the shadow that had hung over his family for generations. I imagined the children we would have, healthy and strong, carrying forward his bloodline into a new era. But Adalbert was late. 30 minutes passed, then an hour. I tried calling his cell phone but it went to voicemail. I tried texting but received no response. Worry began to creep in, replacing my earlier joy. What if something had happened to him? What if his mother had taken a turn for the worse? I decided to drive to his family's estate to check on him. The von Reichenberg property was about 20 minutes outside of town, a sprawling manor house surrounded by gardens that had once been magnificent but now showed signs of neglect, another symptom of the family's declining fortunes and focus. I pulled up the long gravel driveway, noting that several cars were parked near the house, unusual for a weeknight. Lights blazed from the windows and I could hear music playing. Was there some kind of event happening that I had forgotten about? I walked to the front door, confused, and knocked. One of the household staff answered. Frau Gertrude, who had always been kind to me during my visits. But when she saw me, her face went pale. Fräulein Gretchen, she said, her voice strained. You should not be here tonight. What do you mean? Adalbert was supposed to meet me. Is he here? Is everything all right with Frau Kunigund? Frau Gertrude's eyes filled with tears. Oh, child, she whispered. You truly do not know. Know what? Please, Frau Gertrude, what's happening? She stepped aside, and I walked into the entry hall. The source of the music became clear. It was coming from the main drawing room. I moved toward it, my heart beginning to pound with a dread I couldn't name. I reached the doorway and looked inside. And there was Adalbert, dressed in a fine suit, standing beside my sister Lieselot, who wore a white dress. My mother and father were there. Kunigund was there, looking healthier than I had seen her in months, smiling. Several other family friends and relatives were gathered, all holding champagne glasses, all celebrating. They were celebrating an engagement. Adalbert and Lieselot's engagement. I must have made some sound, some gasp or cry, because the room suddenly went silent. Every face turned toward me. My mother's expression shifted from joy to horror. My father looked stricken, confused. But it was Lieselot's face that I would remember forever, the flash of triumph in her eyes before she arranged her features into an expression of apologetic concern. And Adalbert wouldn't meet my eyes. Gretchen, my mother said, moving toward me. We tried to call you. We wanted to tell you ourselves before. Before what? My voice sounded strange, distant, like it was coming from someone else. Before you announced that my sister is engaged to my fiancé. Oh, darling, my mother said, reaching for me. I stepped back. It's not like that. You and Adalbert were never formally engaged. There was no official announcement. It was just talk between the two of you. I looked down at the ring on my finger. No official announcement. I repeated numbly. That ring, Lieselot said, her voice soft and sympathetic in a way that made me want to scream, was just a token of affection, Gretchen. not a real engagement ring. Adalbert explained everything to us. He cared for you, but he never intended. Well, he never intended for it to be permanent. I finally looked at Adalbert. Really looked at him. Tell me she's lying. He shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tight. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. Gretchen, I'm sorry. I never meant for things to go this far between us. I never meant to hurt you. But I can't. My family needs. He trailed off, and Lieselot took his hand, squeezing it supportively. What Adalbert is trying to say, Kunigund interjected, her voice kind but firm, is that our family has certain requirements, certain needs. We need more than just genetic compatibility. We need social standing, I finished for her, the pieces clicking into place. Political connections. The kind of life that someone who studied art history in Vienna can provide. The kind of wife who knows how to move in society circles. Not the daughter of a doctor who works in a medical practice. The silence in the room confirmed it. But I have the genetic results, I said, pulling the papers from my bag with shaking hands. My father just got them today. I'm a perfect match. Any children we have would have a 93% chance of not inheriting the family condition. With Lieselot, the chances are less favorable, my father said quietly. He had moved to stand beside me, his face gray. I told them this. I explained the science. But they have made their decision based on other factors. What factors could possibly matter more than the health of your children? I demanded, looking at Adalbert. What could matter more than the future of your bloodline? It's not just about bloodlines, Lieselot said, and her voice had lost some of its sympathetic softness. There was steel underneath now. It's about partnerships. It's about building something greater than just producing heirs. Adalbert and I connect on a level that you could never understand, Gretchen. We share interests, ambitions. We can help each other in ways that go beyond biology. You've been planning this, I said, looking between them. Since the moment you came home. Since the moment I told you about him. Lieselot didn't deny it. Instead, she smiled that same triumphant smile. I saw an opportunity to make something of myself. To marry into a family with history, with prestige. Why should you have that when I could claim it instead? You've always been the good daughter, the responsible one, the one who followed all the rules. For once, I'm taking what I want. And you? I turned to Adalbert, my voice breaking. You said you loved me. You said we would build a future together. Was any of it real? For the first time, Adalbert looked genuinely pained. I thought I loved you, he said quietly. But with Lieselot I feel alive in a way I didn't with you. I'm sorry, Gretchen. I'm truly sorry. But I can't marry you out of obligation. I can't marry you just because you have the right genes. The cruelty of those words hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning, and I needed to get out, to escape, to be anywhere but here, watching my entire future dissolve in front of me. I ran from that room, from that house, from the sound of my mother calling my name. I drove home through tears, barely able to see the road, my whole body shaking with the force of my grief. But the worst was yet to come. Because 2 weeks later I realized I was pregnant. At first I thought the nausea was just stress, that the exhaustion was just depression, that the missed period was just my body responding to emotional trauma. But when the symptoms persisted, when I couldn't keep food down for 3 days straight, I took a test. Positive. I sat on the bathroom floor, staring at those 2 lines, and I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. Pregnant. I was pregnant with Adalbert's child. Pregnant with the heir to the von Reichenberg bloodline. Pregnant with a child that had a 93% chance of being born healthy, free of the genetic curse that had decimated his family. I was pregnant with everything Adalbert thought he needed, except I was the wrong woman carrying it. The timing meant it had happened probably in February, during one of those nights when Adalbert and I had been together, when he was still supposedly in love with me, when our future still seemed certain. Before Lieselot had worked her way into his heart and his plans. I told my father first. He was devastated, not by the pregnancy itself, but by the impossible situation it created. He wanted me to tell Adalbert immediately, to force him to take responsibility, to acknowledge that this child was his future whether he liked it or not. But I couldn't. I couldn't go back to that house, couldn't face Adalbert and Lieselot, couldn't bear the thought of them knowing that I carried what they most desired. Because I knew what would happen. Adalbert would feel obligated to marry me after all, would leave Lieselot out of duty rather than love, and I would spend the rest of my life knowing I was his second choice, knowing he had settled for me because I happened to be pregnant. I would rather die than live that life. So I made a different choice. I decided to leave. To go somewhere far away where no one knew me, where I could have this baby alone, where I could build a new life that didn't revolve around the von Reichenbergs and their cursed bloodline. But I needed time to plan, time to save money, time to figure out where I would go and how I would survive as a single mother. So I hid the pregnancy for as long as I could. I wore loose clothing. I made excuses to avoid family gatherings where Lieselot might see me. I threw myself into my work at the practice. And in April, Adalbert and Lieselot married. They held the wedding in the same chapel where Adalbert and I were supposed to marry in May. The same chapel where I had already started planning decorations, where I had met with the priest to discuss the ceremony, where I had pictured myself walking down the aisle in a white dress. I didn't attend. Couldn't. But my parents did. They felt they had to, for appearances, for family harmony, even though my father was furious about the whole situation and my mother was caught between her two daughters, trying to make everyone happy and failing miserably. My mother came home from the wedding with photographs, and against my better judgment, I looked at them. Lieselot looked radiant in an expensive gown, her hair perfect, her smile bright. And Adalbert looked empty. His smile didn't reach his eyes. His posture was stiff. In every photo, he looked like a man playing a role rather than living his dream. But he had made his choice and so had I. By May, I couldn't hide the pregnancy any longer. I was starting to show, and people at the practice were beginning to notice. It was time to execute my plan to leave. I told my parents I was moving to Switzerland, that I had been offered a position at a medical facility in Zurich, that it was too good an opportunity to pass up. My father knew the truth, but we had agreed not to tell my mother. She would feel obligated to tell Lieselot, and we couldn't risk that information getting back to the von Reichenbergs. I was packing my things, preparing to leave the following week, when Kunigunde von Reichenberg appeared at our door. She was alone, without Adalbert or any of the household staff. She asked to speak with me privately, and something in her eyes told me she already knew. Somehow she had figured it out. We sat in my father's study, and she looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "You're pregnant with my grandchild," she said. It wasn't a question. I saw no point in denying it. "Yes. And you're planning to leave. To have the baby somewhere far away where my son will never know about it." "Yes." Kunigunde was quiet for a moment, her hands folded in her lap. When she finally spoke again, her voice was heavy with regret. "I made a mistake. We all did. Adalbert should have married you. I know that now. I knew it then deep down, but I let myself be swayed by Lieselot's charm, by the promise of social connections, by the fantasy that my son could have both, a suitable wife and healthy children. I thought perhaps their children would be healthy enough, that perhaps the genetic risks weren't as severe as your father suggested." "But they are," I said. "You know they are." She nodded. "I do. And now my son is married to the wrong woman, and the right woman, the woman carrying the healthy heir my family so desperately needs, is planning to disappear. What do you want from me?" "Yes. Do you want me to tell Adalbert? To ruin his marriage? To trap him into a life with me out of obligation?" "No," Kunigunde said firmly. "I don't want that for you, and I don't think you want it either. But I want to help you. I want to make sure that you and my grandchild are taken care of, that you have everything you need. Not as payment for silence, but as an apology for the pain my family has caused you." "I don't want your money," I said. "I know you don't. But take it anyway. For the baby. This child is a von Reichenberg, whether Adalbert acknowledges it or not. This child deserves to be supported by the family they belong to. In the end, I accepted her help, though it felt like betrayal of myself to do so. She set up a trust fund for the baby, made arrangements for my healthcare during the pregnancy and after, provided me with contacts in Switzerland who could help me establish myself. All done quietly, secretly, with legal documents signed under confidentiality agreements. But as she was leaving, she turned back to me one last time. "Gretchen, there's something you should know. Something that makes this child even more important than you realize." "What do you mean?" "Our family's genetic condition isn't just about blood disorders. It's about fertility. Every generation, it becomes harder for us to have children at all. Adalbert can father children. We know that now, obviously, but Lieselot." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Your father tested her too, when she agreed to marry into our family. The genetic counseling wasn't just about the blood condition. It was about viability. The chances of Lieselot carrying a pregnancy to term are less than 20%. The chances of that child being healthy are even lower." The full weight of what she was saying hit me. "You're saying..." "I'm saying that the child you're carrying may be the only von Reichenberg heir of this generation. Possibly the last von Reichenberg heir ever. This baby isn't just free of the curse. This baby is the salvation of our bloodline." And then she left, and I was alone with this impossible knowledge. I moved to Switzerland in June, settling in a small town near Zurich where no one knew me, where I could be anonymous. I found work at a local medical practice, told people I was a widow, and spent my pregnancy in strange isolation, surrounded by the beauty of the Swiss Alps, supported by Kunigund's secret funding, but utterly alone in the world. I had no friends here, no family. Just me and the baby growing inside me, this child who had become the center of an impossible situation. I spoke to my father regularly by phone, keeping him updated on my health and the pregnancy's progress. He was the only person in my old life who knew where I was, who knew the truth. Through him, I heard occasional news about Adalbert and Lieselot. They were struggling. Lieselot had suffered 2 miscarriages in the first 6 months of their marriage. The family was devastated, the pressure mounting. Adalbert was becoming increasingly withdrawn. His mother's health was deteriorating again, and the von Reichenberg bloodline seemed to be dying despite the wedding that was supposed to save it. And I felt nothing. No satisfaction in their suffering, no vindication, no sense of justice. Just emptiness. Because despite everything they had done to me, I didn't wish pain on them. I just wished I had never met Adalbert von Reichenberg at all. My baby was born in November, during the first snowfall of the season. Boy. Healthy and strong, with a loud cry and a shock of dark hair. The doctors confirmed what we already knew. He showed no signs of the von Reichenberg genetic condition. He was perfect. I named him Maximilian Friedrich Hoffmann after my father. No von Reichenberg name. No acknowledgement of his paternal lineage. This was my son and mine alone. But as I held him in those first days, as I fed him and changed him and watched him sleep, I felt the weight of everything Kunigund had told me. This child was more than just my son. He was the last hope of an ancient family. He carried in his small body the potential to save a bloodline that stretched back centuries. And his father didn't even know he existed. Months passed. I built a life in Switzerland. Small, quiet, but mine. I worked part-time at the medical practice, enough to supplement the trust fund income and maintain my independence. I made a few friends among the other mothers in town. I learned to be happy again in small ways. Maximilian thrived, hitting every developmental milestone early, growing strong and clever and curious. I thought perhaps this was my ending. Perhaps I would simply raise my son here, in this peaceful mountain town, far away from the drama and betrayal that had shattered my old life. Perhaps Adalbert would never need to know, and Maximilian would never need to know, and we would all simply move forward into separate futures. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. On a cold day in March, when Maximilian was 4 months old, my father called with news that changed everything. Kunigund von Reichenberg was dying. The blood disorder had progressed rapidly over the winter, and the doctors gave her weeks at most. She was asking for me. Not Adalbert me. She wanted to see her grandson before she died, wanted to meet the child who carried her family's future, wanted to say goodbye. I didn't want to go. Every instinct in me screamed to stay away, to protect myself and my son from being pulled back into that world. But my father's voice on the phone was heavy with an emotion I couldn't ignore. She's asking for forgiveness, Gretchen. And I think she deserves to see him. She's the only one who tried to make things right. So I went. I packed a bag, bundled Maximilian in warm clothes, and made the journey back to Austria. Back to the town where my life had fallen apart. Back to the von Reichenberg estate where I had last felt my heart break completely. I arrived at night, the manor house lit from within like it had been during that terrible engagement party. But this time there was no celebration. The lights were dim, the atmosphere somber. Frau Gertrude answered the door, her eyes widening when she saw me, then softening as she spotted the baby in my arms. "She's been waiting for you," Frau Gertrude said quietly. "Upstairs in her room. But Fräulein, you should know that Herr Adalbert is also here." My heart stuttered. "Does he know I'm coming?" "No. His mother wanted to see you first. Alone." I climbed the stairs to Kunigun's room, my son sleeping peacefully against my chest. The door was open and I could see her in the bed, smaller than I remembered, frilier, the illness having taken a visible toll. But when she saw me, when she saw Maximilian, her face transformed with joy. "Oh," she breathed. "Oh, Gretchen. Let me see him. Please." I sat beside her bed and carefully transferred Maximilian into her arms. She held him with the practiced ease of someone who had held many babies, tears streaming down her face as she studied his features. "He has the von Reichenberg eyes," she whispered. "And the Hoffman nose. He's perfect. He's absolutely perfect." We sat together for over an hour. She held Maximilian, told him stories about his ancestors, sang him an old Austrian lullaby that her own mother had sung to her. And she talked to me, apologizing over and over for her part in what had happened, for choosing status over substance, for not fighting harder for Adalbert to marry the right woman. "I'm dying," she said eventually, stating the obvious. "And when I'm gone, Adalbert will be the last von Reichenberg. The estate will pass to him, the name will die with him. Unless..." She looked down at Maximilian. "Unless this little one is acknowledged. Unless he takes his rightful place." "No," I said immediately. "I don't want that. I don't want Adalbert's name or his money or his acknowledgement. I just want to raise my son in peace." "But what about what Maximilian wants? When he's grown, when he asks about his father, what will you tell him?" "I'll tell him the truth. That his father chose social advancement over love. That his father married my sister instead of me. That his father doesn't know he exists because I chose not to tell him. And if he resents you for that choice." I had no answer to that. It was a fear that haunted me in the dark hours of night, the question of whether I was doing the right thing by keeping this secret. Kunigun squeezed my hand. "I'm not asking you to tell Adalbert tonight. I'm not asking you to claim anything for yourself. But I am asking you to consider the future. This child may need to know his heritage someday. He may need the resources of the von Reichenberg family. And my son deserves to know he has an heir. That despite all his mistakes, despite the poor choices he made, his bloodline will continue." Before I could respond, there was a knock on the door. "Mother!" Adalbert's voice. "Frau Gertrude said you wanted to see me." Kunigund and I locked eyes. "Do you want me to?" she started. But it was too late. The door was opening and Adalbert was stepping into the room. His eyes tired and his face drawn. He looked like a man who had aged years in the months since I'd seen him. His eyes went to his mother first, then to me, and I watched as recognition bloomed into shock. "Gretchen! What are you?" Then he saw the baby in his mother's arms. His eyes widened and he went completely still. "Is that..." He couldn't finish the sentence. "Your son?" Kunigund said quietly. This is Maximilian. He's 4 months old, he's healthy, and he's the future of our family. The color drained from Adalbert's face. He stared at Maximilian, then at me, then back at the baby. My son, he repeated, his voice barely audible. You were pregnant. When you announced your engagement to my sister, I finished for him. I found out 2 weeks after your engagement party. And I chose not to tell you. He moved closer, his steps uncertain. May I hold him? Every protective instinct in me wanted to say no, to keep my child away from the man who had broken my heart so completely. But Kunigund was gently passing Maximilian to his father, and I couldn't stop it without making a scene. Adalbert took his son in his arms with shaking hands. He stared down at Maximilian's sleeping face, and I watched as tears began to fall down his cheeks. He's beautiful, Adalbert whispered. He's perfect. He doesn't have the family condition, I said, my voice flat. 93% chance of being healthy, remember? Turns out he's in the 93%. The words hit Adalbert like a slap. He looked up at me, his face crumpling. Gretchen, Don't, I said sharply. Don't you dare apologize now. Don't you dare tell me you made a mistake, or that you wish things had been different. You made your choice. You chose Lieselot, you chose status over substance, you chose wrong, and now you have to live with it. But I have a son, Adalbert said, his voice breaking. I have a son, and I didn't know. You kept him from me. I kept him from a man who told me he couldn't marry me just because I had the right genes. I shot back. I kept him from a man who threw away everything we had for my sister. What exactly did you think I owed you, Adalbert? The truth. You lost the right to my truth when you married Lieselot in the chapel where we were supposed to exchange vows. Kunigund held up a weak hand. Please, both of you. This isn't helping anyone. Adalbert, your son exists. Gretchen, his father, knows now. We need to decide what happens next, not relitigate the past. What happens next is that I return to Switzerland with my son, I said firmly. Nothing has changed except that now you know. Maximilian and I have a life there. Good life. We don't need the von Reichenberg name or money or acknowledgement. But I need him, Adalbert said desperately, still holding Maximilian. My marriage is falling apart. Lieselot has had 3 miscarriages now. 3. The doctors say her chances of carrying a child to term are almost 0. My mother is dying. I'm watching everything my family built for centuries crumble around me, and now I find out I have a healthy son who could have prevented all of this if only I had. He stopped, unable to continue. If only you had what? Pressed. If only you had married me instead. Is that what you were going to say? Well, you didn't. You married her. And now you get to live with that choice. I was wrong, Adalbert said, looking at me with such raw pain that it almost made me falter. I was so wrong, Gretchen. I thought I wanted what Lieselot offered, the sophistication, the connections, the excitement. But what I got was a marriage with no foundation, a wife who cares more about status than love, and a future with no children. I gave up everything real for a fantasy, and by the time I realized it, you were gone. When did you realize it? Asked, my voice cold. On your wedding day. On your wedding night. Or after the first miscarriage, when you understood the price of your choice. He flinched. The wedding day, he admitted quietly. I stood at that altar and looked at Lieselot walking toward me, and all I could think about was that it should have been you. That I had made a terrible mistake. But it was too late. The families were there, the announcement had been made, and I convinced myself I could learn to be happy. That I could make it work. And did you? Yes. Are you happy, Adalbert? No, he said simply. I haven't been happy since the day I let you go. And Lieselot isn't happy either. She thought she was marrying a wealthy nobleman with an impressive estate and unlimited resources. Instead, she got a struggling family with a genetic curse, mounting medical bills, and a husband who doesn't love her. We're both trapped in a marriage neither of us wanted, built on mistakes and regrets. Despite everything, despite all the pain he had caused me, I felt a flicker of sympathy. Not for him, never for him, but for the waste of it all. 2 lives ruined, multiple hearts broken, a family legacy crumbling, all because of pride and poor choices and the belief that love wasn't enough. Maximilian stirred in Adalbert's arms, making a small sound. Adalbert looked down at him with such tenderness, such longing, that I had to look away. "Let me be part of his life," Adalbert said quietly. "Please, Gretchen. I know I don't deserve it. I know I have no right to ask. But he's my son. Let me know him. Let me support him. Let me try to be the father he deserves, even if I can never be the man you deserved." "And what about Lieselot?" asked. "What about your wife? Does she know you're up here holding another woman's baby? Does she know that I carried the heir she couldn't provide?" As if summoned by her name, the door burst open, and Lieselot herself stood in the doorway. She was thinner than I remembered, her face drawn, her eyes wild. She looked between me and Adalbert and the baby, and I watched understanding dawn with horror. "No," she breathed. "No, that can't be." "It's true," Kunigunde said from the bed, her voice tired but firm. "This is Adalbert's son. Gretchen was pregnant when you married Adalbert. She's been raising him alone in Switzerland." Lieselot's face went through a rapid series of emotions: shock, hurt, rage, and finally, a kind of desperate calculation. "But this changes everything," she said, moving into the room. "If Adalbert has an heir, if there's a healthy von Reichenberg son, then nothing changes for you," I interrupted. "Maximilian is my son. He carries my name, not the von Reichenberg name. He has no legal claim to anything, and I intend to keep it that way." "But the bloodline," Lieselot said, looking at Adalbert. "Your mother's condition, the genetic curse. This child is the answer. He has to be acknowledged. He has to take his place in the family." "Since when do you care about the bloodline?" asked coldly. "You married Adalbert for status and money, not out of concern for genetic preservation. Don't pretend you suddenly care about the family legacy." Lieselot's face flushed. "How dare you judge me? You who kept a child from his father out of spite." "Out of self-preservation," I corrected. "I kept my son from a man who had proven he would abandon me at the first opportunity. I kept my son from a family that valued appearances over integrity. And I would do it again." "Stop," Adalbert said, his voice cutting through our argument. He was still holding Maximilian, who had woken up and was looking around with curious eyes. "Both of you, please stop. This isn't about us. It's about him." He gestured to Maximilian. "It's about what's best for this child. What's best for him is to stay with me, away from all of this," I said. "Away from the drama and the dysfunction and the weight of a legacy that isn't his to carry. What's best for him is to know his father," Adalbert countered. "To have access to his heritage, to the resources that come with being a von Reichenberg." "Resources?" I laughed bitterly. "Your estate is falling apart. Your mother is dying. Your family fortune has been drained by medical expenses. What resources are you offering him besides a cursed name and a legacy of disappointment?" The words were cruel, but they were true, and Adalbert knew it. He looked down at Maximilian, and I could see the weight of his failures written across his face. "Then let me give him something better," he said quietly. "Let me be the father who breaks the cycle, who doesn't make the same mistakes his ancestors made, who puts his child's welfare above pride or status or tradition." He looked up at me. "I can't undo what I did to you. I can't take back choosing Lieselot or the pain I caused, or the months you spent alone and pregnant because of my selfishness. But I can be better going forward. I can be the father Maximilian deserves. If you'll let me." I wanted to say no. Every wounded part of me wanted to deny him, to make him feel the loss that I had felt, to ensure he understood the consequences of his choices. But as I looked at Maximilian in his father's arms, I saw something that made me pause. Adalbert was looking at our son with unconditional love. Despite everything, despite the shock, despite the complications, despite the wreckage of his marriage, he loved this child he had just met. It was there in his eyes, in the way he held him, in the gentle way he adjusted the baby's blanket. And I realized that keeping them apart wouldn't just punish Adalbert. It would punish Maximilian. My son deserved to know his father, even if his father was flawed. Even if his father had made terrible choices. Because those choices had been about me, not about Maximilian. I need to think, I said finally. This is too much too fast. I need time. How much time? Lieselot demanded. How long are you going to drag this out? We need to know, I need to know what this means for us, for our marriage, for... Your marriage is not my concern, I said sharply. Your marriage was built on betrayal and poor choices, and whatever happens to it is between you and Adalbert. My only concern is my son. Kunigun's weak voice interrupted us. Gretchen, please. Sit with me a moment. The rest of you leave us. Adalbert reluctantly handed Maximilian back to me, his hands lingering for a moment on his son. Lieselot looked like she wanted to argue, but one look at Kunigun's face silenced her. They both left, and I was alone with the dying woman and my child. I don't have much time left, Kunigun said, and it was true. Even in the hour I had been there, she seemed to have faded further. So I'm going to be direct. You have every right to keep Maximilian away from this family. We hurt you badly, unforgivably. But I'm asking you to consider something beyond the pain. What? I asked, settling Maximilian against my chest. Legacy isn't just about bloodlines and estates and family names, Kunigun said. It's about connection. It's about knowing where you come from. I grew up knowing my great-grandmother's stories, seeing her jewelry, understanding the sacrifices she made to preserve our family during hard times. That connection, that sense of continuity, it shaped who I became. And look where that legacy got you, I said quietly. Dying young of a genetic disease, watching your children suffer, seeing your family name fade. Maybe legacy isn't as valuable as you think. Perhaps, she acknowledged. Perhaps our particular legacy has brought more pain than joy. But that's precisely why Maximilian is so important. He's the first von Reichenberg in generations to be free of the curse. He could be the one who transforms the legacy, who takes all the good parts, the resilience, the history, the connection to this land and these people, and leaves behind the bad. The disease, the pressure, the obsession with bloodlines that led my son to make such poor choices. That's a lot of responsibility to put on a baby, I said. I'm not asking you to put it on him now, Kunigun said. I'm asking you to give him the option to choose it later. Let him know his father. Let him understand where he comes from. And when he's grown, let him decide for himself what kind of relationship he wants with his heritage. And if I do this, I said slowly, what exactly are you proposing? Adalbert is married to my sister. Do I just... What? Show up for holidays. Pretend everything is normal. Watch Lieselot play stepmother to my child. Lieselot will not be part of Maximilian's life, Kunigun said firmly. That much I can promise you. My son's marriage is ending, whether he acknowledges it yet or not. They have no children, no real connection beyond legal documents. And after what she did to you, stealing your fiancé, she has no place in your son's life. Adalbert can't just divorce her because it's inconvenient, I said. That's not how marriage works. It works exactly like that when both parties are miserable and when there's cause, Kunigun said. And there is cause. Lieselot has been having an affair. The words hung in the air. What? With an art dealer in Vienna. Started 4 months ago after the second miscarriage. Adalbert knows. He hired an investigator when her behavior became suspicious. But he hasn't confronted her yet because he doesn't know what he wants. Until now, he didn't have a reason to leave. Now he does. He has a son who needs him. I didn't know what to feel. Vindication that Lieselot's perfect marriage had crumbled. Satisfaction that she was experiencing betrayal the way I had. Or just sadness at the waste of it all, the pain that could have been avoided if Adalbert had simply chosen correctly in the first place. So what are you suggesting? Asked. That Adalbert divorce Lieselot, and then what? Ask me to marry him after all. Pick up where we left off as if nothing happened. No, Kunigund said. That ship has sailed and I think you know it. You may have loved my son once, but that love is gone, isn't it? Killed by betrayal and time and all the hurt between you. She was right. I looked inside myself for any remnant of the love I had felt for Adalbert, and found only ashes. Whatever I had felt for him had burned away, leaving behind only the memory of feeling. I'm not suggesting marriage, Kunigund continued. I'm suggesting co-parenting. I'm suggesting that Adalbert be allowed to know his son, to support his son, to be present in his son's life. You maintain your independence, your home in Switzerland, your life. But you allow Adalbert visits, allow him to contribute financially, allow Maximilian to grow up knowing both parents. And the von Reichenberg name, the inheritance, the legacy, that's for Maximilian to decide when he's older. If he wants to use both surnames, let him. If he wants to claim his inheritance, let him. If he wants nothing to do with any of it, that's his right too. Don't make the decision for him based on your hurt. Let him choose his own path. It was reasonable. It was more than reasonable. It was generous and thoughtful and exactly the kind of arrangement that would be best for Maximilian. But it required something from me that I wasn't sure I could give. Forgiveness. Or if not forgiveness, at least the willingness to move forward without carrying all this bitterness. I need time, I repeated. I can't decide this tonight. I understand, Kunigund said. But Gretchen, don't take too long. For Maximilian's sake, and for Adalbert's. They've already lost months together. Don't let pride take years. She died 2 days later. I stayed at the estate for those days, sleeping in a guest room far from where Adalbert and Lieselot had their chambers, spending long hours with Kunigund and letting her hold Maximilian, letting her say goodbye to the grandson who represented everything she had hoped for her family. On her last night, when she could barely speak, she whispered one final thing to me. Thank you for bringing him. Thank you for letting me see that the von Reichenberg line will continue, and that it will be better than what came before. The funeral was large. All the local families attended, along with distant relatives I had never met. I stood in the back with Maximilian in my arms, watching as Adalbert delivered the eulogy with dignity despite his obvious grief. And I watched as Lieselot stood beside him, playing the supportive wife, even though everyone could see the cracks in their facade. After the funeral, Adalbert pulled me aside. I'm filing for divorce, he said without preamble. I've spoken to my lawyers. On the grounds of adultery and irreconcilable differences. It should be final within 6 months. That's between you and Lieselot, I said neutrally. I'm doing it for Maximilian, he continued. And for myself. My mother was right. The marriage was a mistake from the start. I can't undo the past, but I can refuse to let it dictate my future. And what do you want from me? Asked. A chance, he said simply. A chance to be Maximilian's father. I'm not asking for marriage or reconciliation or anything romantic. That bridge is burned and I know it. I'm just asking for the opportunity to know my son. To be part of his life. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the man I had loved, but a man broken by his own choices, trying desperately to do something right. And I thought about Kunigund's words, about legacy and connection and giving Maximilian choices. Supervised visits, I said finally. In Switzerland on my terms. You can come once a month to see him. We'll establish a schedule, put everything in writing, keep it professional and clear. And if you prove yourself, if you show up consistently and put Maximilian's needs first, then we can discuss expanding the arrangement. Relief flooded Adalbert's face. Thank you, Gretchen. I promise you won't regret this. I already regret it, I said honestly. But I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for our son. Don't make me regret it more by disappointing him. And so we began this strange new life. I returned to Switzerland with Maximilian, back to my small town and my quiet existence. Adalbert's divorce proceeded, causing a scandal that I heard about only through my father. Lieselot contested it initially, but when the evidence of her affair became public, she relented, accepting a settlement and disappearing back to Vienna. Adalbert came to visit Maximilian exactly as we had arranged. Once a month, he would make the journey to Switzerland, spending a Saturday afternoon with his son. At first, the visits were awkward, supervised by me in my small apartment, with Adalbert unsure how to hold a baby, how to play with him, how to be a father. But he learned. He showed up consistently, never missed a visit, never made excuses. He brought appropriate gifts. Not expensive toys meant to impress, but thoughtful items that Maximilian could actually use. He asked questions about developmental milestones and feeding schedules. He listened when I talked about Maximilian's personality emerging, about his preferences and quirks. And slowly, month by month, I watched Adalbert transform from the selfish man who had chosen status over love into someone different. Someone humbled. Someone trying. By the time Maximilian turned 1, we had expanded the visits to include overnight stays. By the time he was 2, Adalbert was coming every other weekend. And by the time Maximilian was 3 and starting to talk, he knew Adalbert as Papa, and looked forward to his visits with genuine excitement. I never fell back in love with Adalbert. That door remained firmly closed, locked by betrayal and protected by hard-won peace. But I learned to work with him. I learned to trust him with our son. I learned that people could change, could grow, could become better versions of themselves even after making terrible mistakes. Adalbert never remarried. He sold the von Reichenberg estate. It was too expensive to maintain and too full of sad memories. He moved to a smaller property closer to Switzerland, making the visits easier. He established a trust fund for Maximilian, not as payment or obligation, but as a father providing for his son. He even attended therapy to work through his issues with pressure and expectations and the weight of family legacy. And Maximilian thrived. He grew into a happy, confident child, secure in the knowledge that both his parents loved him, even if they weren't together. He had his mother's practicality and his father's intensity, but without the burden of genetic illness or the weight of impossible expectations. When Maximilian was 5, Adalbert asked if we could tell him the full story, not the sanitized version about parents who had been together once but weren't anymore, but the real truth about how he came to exist. I hesitated, worried it was too much for such a young child. But Adalbert insisted. He should know that he was wanted by you always. That you chose to have him even when it was hard. That you protected him and fought for him and built a life for him. And he should know that I made mistakes, but that I'm trying to do better. That's a valuable lesson. That adults mess up sometimes, but we can always choose to improve. So we told him in age-appropriate terms. We told him that Papa had once been promised to Mama, but had made a mistake and married someone else. That Mama had discovered she was pregnant after Papa married the other person. That Mama had decided to raise him alone because she loved him so much. And that when Papa finally learned about him, Papa realized he had made a terrible mistake, and he worked very hard to prove he could be a good father. Maximilian listened with serious eyes, then asked the question I had been dreading. Did Papa marry my Aunt Lieselot? There was no hiding from it. Yes, I said gently. Papa married Mama's sister. But that marriage ended a long time ago, before you were old enough to remember. Is Aunt Lieselot mean? Maximilian asked. Aunt Lieselot made some choices that hurt Mama very much, Adalbert said carefully. And because of that, Aunt Lieselot is not part of our family. You might meet her someday when you're older, but that will be your choice. Maximilian thought about this for a long moment, then turned to me. Are you sad that Papa married Aunt Lieselot instead of you? I chose my words carefully. I was very sad for a long time. But if Papa had married me, and if he hadn't married Aunt Lieselot, maybe everything would have been different. and maybe we wouldn't have you exactly as you are. So I can't be too sad about it because I got you, and you're the best thing that ever happened to me." This seemed to satisfy him. He hugged me tightly, then scrambled over to hug Adalbert too. "I'm glad you're my papa," he said. "Even if you made mistakes." Adalbert's eyes filled with tears. "I'm glad I'm your papa too. And I promise I'll keep trying to be better for you." Now Maximilian is 7. He splits his time between my home in Switzerland and Adalbert's property in Austria. He goes to a good school, has friends from both countries, speaks German fluently with a charming mix of Austrian and Swiss accents. He knows he's a von Reichenberg by blood but a Hoffmann by choice, and that someday he'll decide for himself which name he wants to use, or whether he wants to use both. The genetic curse that haunted the von Reichenberg family for generations has no hold on him. He's healthy, strong, clever. Everything his father's family hoped for in an heir but without any of the suffering. In that sense, he really is the salvation of the bloodline, the child who broke the curse simply by existing. As for me, I've built a life I'm proud of. I work full-time at the medical practice now, managing operations and patient care. I've made real friends here, people who know my story and support me. I've even gone on a few dates, though nothing serious yet. The wounds from Adalbert's betrayal have healed into scars, still visible, still sensitive sometimes, but no longer actively painful. I've seen Lieselot only once in the past 7 years, a chance encounter in Vienna when I was there for a conference. She's remarried to the art dealer she had the affair with, and she seemed genuinely happy, if a bit strained around me. We exchanged polite greetings and nothing more. Some betrayals don't earn forgiveness, only distance. My parents are proud of how I've handled everything. My father especially. He tells me often that I showed remarkable strength in protecting Maximilian while still allowing Adalbert to be a father. My mother took longer to come around, caught for years between her daughters, but she's finally accepted that what Lieselot did was wrong, and that my choices were right. And Adalbert has become a friend, in the strange way that co-parents sometimes do. We talk regularly about Maximilian, share photos and updates, coordinate schedules and decisions. We attend school events together, celebrate birthdays together, present a united front for our son. There's no romance between us, no lingering attraction, but there is respect. Hard-won, hard-earned respect. He apologizes sometimes, late at night when he's dropping Maximilian off after a weekend visit, standing in my doorway with that same pained expression he wore when he first held our son. "I'm sorry," he'll say. "For everything. For not choosing you. For not realizing what I had until it was gone." And I always give him the same answer. "I know. But it doesn't matter anymore. We can't change the past. We can only make sure Maximilian has a better future than the one we gave him the right to. That's the truth of it. Adalbert broke our bond and married my sister, but I carried the child destined to save his bloodline. That child became the bridge between a painful past and a hopeful future. That child became the reason we all had to grow beyond our mistakes, our betrayals, our selfishness. Looking back, I can see now that Kunigund was right about legacy. It's not about bloodlines or estates or family names preserved through generations. It's about the choices we make and the people we become because of those choices. The von Reichenberg legacy was one of genetic suffering and dying lineages. But Maximilian's legacy, the one he'll create for himself, can be something entirely different. He can be the boy who grew up knowing both parents loved him, even though those parents weren't together. He can be the young man who understands that people make mistakes but can also make amends. He can be the adult who chooses his own path, who takes what's valuable from his heritage and leaves behind what's toxic. That's what I want for him. Not wealth or status or an ancient family name, but freedom. Freedom to choose who he wants to be, what he wants to carry forward, what he wants to leave behind. And maybe, in giving him that freedom, I've found my own. I don't regret keeping my pregnancy secret in those early months. I don't regret choosing to raise Maximilian alone rather than forcing Adalbert into a marriage he didn't want. And I don't regret eventually allowing Adalbert into our lives, letting him prove he could change, could grow, could become the father our son deserved. Because every choice I made for Maximilian. Every decision was about protecting him, providing for him, giving him the best possible life. And when I look at him now, this brilliant, kind, confident 7-year-old who lights up every room he enters, I know I succeeded. The story that began with betrayal and heartbreak, with a broken bond and a stolen future, has transformed into something I never expected: redemption. Not for Adalbert, though he's found some measure of peace. Not for Lieselot, who lives with her own consequences. Not even for me, though I've healed more than I thought possible. Redemption for the idea that love can exist in different forms. That family can be built from broken pieces. That the most precious gifts sometimes come from the deepest pain. That bloodlines are saved not by genetic preservation but by the courage to break destructive patterns and create new ones. Maximilian is the child who saved the von Reichenberg bloodline, yes. But more importantly, he's the child who saved us all from being trapped in our worst moments forever. He's the reason we had to do better, be better, reach beyond our pain toward something healthier. And that, I've come to believe, is the real meaning of legacy. Not what we inherit from the past, but what we create for the future. Not the mistakes we make but how we respond to them. Not the betrayals we suffer, but how we choose to move forward despite them. So when people ask me now if I regret what happened, if I wish Adalbert had chosen me instead of Lieselot, if I'm bitter about raising Maximilian alone for his first years, I tell them this: I regret the pain. I regret the betrayal. I regret that it had to happen the way it did. But I don't regret where we ended up. Because the journey, as painful as it was, brought me to exactly where I needed to be. Strong enough to stand alone, wise enough to forgive not for others but for myself, and grateful enough to see the blessings hidden inside the wounds. Maximilian is sleeping now in his room. His breathing soft and steady. His face peaceful in the moonlight streaming through his window. In his features, I can see echoes of Adalbert, traces of the von Reichenberg lineage stretching back through centuries. But I also see myself, see my father's determination and my own resilience. He's ours, mine and Adalbert's, but he's also entirely his own person. The child who broke a curse simply by being born healthy. The child who forced two broken people to become better. The child who proved that sometimes the most powerful kind of saving isn't dramatic or heroic, but simply existing, simply being loved, simply having people who choose every day to do right by you. And as I stand in his doorway watching him sleep, I realize that I'm grateful. Not for the betrayal, not for the pain, not for any of the terrible things that happened. But for this moment right here, for this child right here, for this life I've built from ashes and determination and the fierce love of a mother who refused to let heartbreak destroy her. Adalbert broke our bond and married my sister. I carried the child destined to save his bloodline. But we both raised the child who saved us from ourselves. And in the end, perhaps that's the greatest legacy any of us could hope to leave behind. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, if you've felt the weight of betrayal and the slow healing of time, if you've understood the complicated truth that sometimes the people who hurt us most can still become people we learn to work with, to trust in limited ways, to build something new with, then you understand what I've learned. Life doesn't always give us the fairy tale endings we want. Sometimes the prince marries the wrong sister. Sometimes the heroine has to raise the child alone. Sometimes the happy ending is not romance or vindication or revenge, but simply peace, simply healing, simply the quiet satisfaction of knowing you made the right choices for the right reasons, and that your child will grow up better because of it. That's my story. That's our story. Mine and Adalbert's and Maximilian's, and even, in a strange way, Lieselot's and Kunigun's. We're all connected by the choices we made, the mistakes we committed, and the ways we tried to make things right. And Maximilian, beautiful Maximilian, is the living proof that even from betrayal and heartbreak, something precious can grow. Something worth every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt and fear. Something that makes all the pain worth it, not because it erases that pain but because it transcends it. He is the child who saved a bloodline. But more than that, he's the child who saved us all from becoming permanently broken by our worst moments. And for that gift, I will be grateful every day for the rest of my life. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying with me through every painful revelation, every hard choice, every moment of growth. And if you're going through your own betrayal, your own heartbreak, your own impossible situation, know this. You will survive it. You will grow from it. And one day, you'll look back and realize that you're stronger than you ever imagined possible. The pain doesn't disappear, but it transforms. It becomes part of your story, but not the end of your story. Keep going. Keep choosing what's right even when it's hard. Keep protecting the precious things entrusted to you. Keep believing that you deserve peace and healing and second chances. 'Cause you do. We all do. And sometimes, the salvation we're looking for isn't dramatic or obvious. Sometimes it's sleeping peacefully in the next room, breathing softly, dreaming of tomorrow. Sometimes it's found in the courage to let go of what we can't have and embrace what we do. Sometimes it's simply the knowledge that we did our best with impossible circumstances, and that our best was enough. That's my truth. That's what carrying Adalbert's child taught me. That's what raising Maximilian has shown me. That's what forgiving, not forgetting, never forgetting but forgiving has given me. And I hope, wherever you are, whatever you're facing, that you find your own version of this truth. Your own form of salvation. Your own path to peace. You deserve it, just as I did. Just as Maximilian does. Just as we all do, even those of us who have made terrible mistakes and hurt the people we love. We all deserve the chance to be better. To do better. To create something beautiful from the ashes of our failures. And that, in the end, is what I want to leave you with. Not the story of betrayal, but the story of what came after. Not the pain, but the healing. Not the breaking, but the building of something new. May you find your own version of that building. May you discover your own strength in impossible circumstances. May you learn to forgive yourself and maybe others, not because they deserve it but because you deserve peace. And may you always remember that the end of one story is just the beginning of another. That heartbreak can transform into healing. That curses can be broken. That bloodlines can be saved, but people, real, flawed, complicated people, can save themselves. This is my story. This is our story. And it's not finished yet, because Maximilian is still growing, still becoming who he's meant to be. The best parts of the story are still ahead. The man he'll become, the choices he'll make, the legacy he'll create for himself. But for now, this is enough. This moment of peace, this life we've built, this family we've created from broken pieces and second chances. This is enough. And so am I. Finally, after everything, I am enough. Not because of what I survived or who I forgave or what I accomplished, but simply because I chose to be. Because I decided that my worth wasn't determined by whether Adalbert chose me, or whether my sister betrayed me, or whether the von Reichenberg bloodline continued. My worth was inherent, unchangeable, mine. That realization didn't come quickly. It took years of therapy, years of sitting with my pain and anger, years of watching Maximilian grow and recognizing that I had to model self-worth for him if I wanted him to have it himself. But it came eventually, slowly, like dawn breaking over the mountains outside my window. And with it came something else. The ability to see Adalbert and Lieselot not as villains in my story, but as flawed humans making their own mistakes, living with their own consequences, trying in their own imperfect ways to find happiness. Lieselot never apologized. Not truly. When we had that brief encounter in Vienna, she said something vague about unfortunate circumstances and everyone moving forward, but nothing that acknowledged the deliberate cruelty of what she had done. And I've made peace with that. Some people never develop the self-awareness to recognize their own wrongdoing, and demanding that acknowledgement only gives them power over your healing. She lost more than she gained in the end. She got a few years of being Lady von Reichenberg, but it was hollow. A marriage without love, a status that came with financial struggles and genetic counseling sessions and the constant pressure to produce an heir she couldn't provide. And when it fell apart, when Adalbert filed for divorce and the affair became public knowledge, she became the subject of gossip and judgment in all the social circles she had been so eager to join. I don't take pleasure in that. I simply observe it, recognize it as consequence rather than karma, and move on. My parents struggled for a long time with what happened between their daughters. My mother, especially, wanted to maintain relationship with both of us, wanted family gatherings where we all pretended everything was fine. But I had to set boundaries. I told her I would not attend events where Lieselot was present, that I would not force Maximilian to interact with an aunt who had caused his mother such profound pain, that love had to include respect for my limits. It was hard for her. She mourned the loss of the family unity she had imagined. But she eventually understood, and she chose to maintain individual relationships with both of us rather than forcing an artificial reconciliation that would have benefited no one. My father never wavered. From the moment he learned the full truth of what happened, he sided with me completely. Not out of favoritism, he explained, but out of recognition of betrayal. He continued to provide medical care for the von Reichenberg family. That was his professional obligation, but he made clear that his personal relationship with Adalbert was damaged beyond repair. Only his relationship with Maximilian, his grandson, mattered to him now. Those boundaries, those clear lines about what I would and wouldn't accept, they were part of my healing too. For too long, I had been the accommodating one, the understanding one, the one who bent to make others comfortable. Asserting my needs, protecting my peace, refusing to pretend for the sake of others, that was revolutionary for me. And it taught Maximilian something crucial. That it's okay to have boundaries, that forgiveness doesn't mean accepting poor treatment, that you can be kind without being a doormat. He asks questions sometimes, about the complicated dynamics of our family. Why doesn't Aunt Lieselot come to visit? Why doesn't Opa Friedrich spend time with Papa outside of medical appointments? Why do some families all live together and celebrate holidays together but we don't? I answer honestly at age-appropriate levels. I tell him that sometimes people hurt each other badly, and while we can forgive, we don't always forget. That forgiveness is about freeing ourselves from anger, not about pretending nothing happened. That you can love someone from a distance, can wish them well without wanting them in your life. He seems to understand in the way children do. He doesn't press for reunions or try to fix what's broken. He simply accepts that this is how our family works, and he focuses on the relationships that are healthy and present rather than mourning the ones that aren't. Adalbert has been the biggest surprise in all of this. I genuinely didn't think he would follow through with consistent visitation. I expected him to show up enthusiastically for a few months, and then gradually fade away as the reality of single fatherhood set in, as the novelty wore off, as other priorities emerged. But he proved me wrong. Month after month, year after year, he showed up. Even when Maximilian was a colicky infant who screamed through entire visits. Even when he was a terrible twos toddler who threw tantrums and made everything difficult. Even when he was a moody 5-year-old going through a phase of saying he hated Papa after a disagreement. Adalbert showed up. He learned. He grew. He transformed from a man who had always taken the easy way, who had chosen status over substance, into a father who did the hard work of parenting even when it was inconvenient or uncomfortable or frustrating. I think losing his mother and his marriage in quick succession broke something in him. Or perhaps it broke open something that had been closed. He hit rock bottom in a way that forced him to examine who he was and who he wanted to be. And he chose to be better. Not for me. That's important to understand. His transformation wasn't about winning me back or earning my forgiveness or fixing what he had broken between us. It was about being the father Maximilian deserved and, in doing that, becoming a man he could respect when he looked in the mirror. We've had difficult conversations over the years, Adalbert and I. Late-night talks after Maximilian has gone to bed, sitting in my small kitchen with cups of tea growing cold between us. Conversations about guilt and regret, about the impossibility of undoing the past, about learning to live with the consequences of our choices. He's told me things in those conversations that help me understand what happened, even if they don't excuse it. About the pressure he felt as the last male heir, the weight of his family's expectations, the fear that choosing me would mean choosing a future of sick children and dying bloodlines. About how Lieselot had seemed like a solution, someone who could provide the social connections to offset the family's declining fortunes, someone who seemed strong enough to handle the pressure, someone who made him feel like he could escape the weight of responsibility even for a few hours. He didn't love her, he's admitted. Not really. He loved the fantasy of what life with her could be, the escape she represented from the reality of his situation. And by the time he realized the fantasy was empty, it was too late. He was married, I was gone, and the life he had wanted with me was impossible. I listen to these confessions not because I need them, but because he seems to need to say them. And in some strange way, hearing his regret has helped me let go of the last remnants of anger. Because I can see clearly now that his choices weren't really about me at all. They were about him, his fears, his weaknesses, his inability at that time to choose the hard right thing over the easy wrong thing. Understanding that has freed me from the need to take his betrayal personally. It was personal in its impact, but not in its motivation. And that distinction matters. Maximilian's 7th birthday party is next week. We're having it at a park halfway between my home and Adalbert's, a neutral space where both sides of his family can attend. My parents will be there, Adalbert will be there, some of Maximilian's school friends and their parents will be there. Lieselot will not be there. That's non-negotiable. Maximilian has expressed curiosity about meeting her someday, and I've told him that when he's older, maybe when he's a teenager and can process the complicated history, we can arrange a meeting if he still wants one. But for now, his childhood will be protected from the woman who contributed to its complicated origins. We're planning games and cake and presents. Maximilian has requested a science-themed party. He's fascinated by chemistry lately, wants to be a doctor like his Opa Friedrich. Adalbert and I have coordinated on gifts, making sure we're not duplicating efforts, presenting a united front as co-parents who communicate and cooperate. And as I prepare for this party, as I order decorations and plan activities and imagine my son's face lighting up with joy, I'm struck by how ordinary this all feels. How normal. How far removed from the dramatic betrayal and pain that characterized the beginning of this story. This is what healing looks like. Not fireworks or dramatic confrontations or revenge. Just ordinary moments of joy. Just a child's birthday party. Just co-parents working together. Just life continuing forward despite the pain that came before. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if Adalbert had chosen me from the beginning. If he had married me as planned. If Maximilian had been born legitimate into the von Reichenberg family. If we had lived as husband and wife at that crumbling estate. Would we have been happy? I don't think so. Adalbert wasn't ready to be the partner I needed. Wasn't capable of putting someone else's needs ahead of his own. We would have struggled. With his family's expectations, with financial pressures, with the weight of legacy and tradition. And eventually we probably would have divorced anyway, but with far more bitterness because we would have felt trapped by marriage vows and family obligations. So perhaps things happened the way they needed to happen. Perhaps the pain was necessary to break us both down so we could rebuild into better versions of ourselves. Perhaps Maximilian needed to be born outside of marriage, outside of expectation, so he could be free to become whoever he wants to be rather than whoever the von Reichenberg legacy demands. I don't believe in fate or destiny or that everything happens for a reason. I think things just happen, and we assign meaning to them afterward to help us make sense of the chaos. But I do believe in resilience, in growth, in the human capacity to transform suffering into wisdom. And I believe in love. Not the romantic love that failed me so spectacularly with Adalbert, but the deeper, more enduring love of a parent for a child. The love that makes you wake up at 3 a.m. to soothe nightmares, that makes you sacrifice your own comfort for your child's well-being, that makes you strong enough to set boundaries and brave enough to forgive when forgiveness serves your child's interests. That love has been my salvation. Not Adalbert's return to Maximilian's life, not Kunigun's financial support, not even my own resilience, though all those things mattered. But the love I feel for my son, the fierce protectiveness and tender joy and overwhelming pride, that's what carried me through the darkest moments and continues to light my path forward. If I could go back and talk to the Gretchen who stood in that drawing room 7 years ago, watching Adalbert announce his engagement to Lieselot, watching her entire future crumble, I would tell her this. You're going to survive this. It's going to hurt worse than you can imagine, worse than anything you've experienced before. You're going to cry yourself to sleep for months. You're going to doubt yourself, blame yourself, wonder what you could have done differently. You're going to be pregnant and alone and terrified in a way that will make you question everything. But you're also going to discover a strength you never knew you had. You're going to make hard choices and stand by them. You're going to protect your child and build a life and refuse to let betrayal define you. You're going to grow into someone you actually like, someone you're proud to be, someone who knows her worth independent of anyone else's valuation. And most importantly, you're going to be happy. Not right away and not in the way you expected, but eventually you're going to wake up and realize that you're content with your life. That you wouldn't trade what you have for what you lost. That the child born from heartbreak became the source of your greatest joy. So hold on. Keep going. Trust that you're stronger than you know, braver than you feel, and more deserving of good things than you can currently believe. The story isn't over. It's just beginning. And 7 years later, I can confirm that everything I would tell my past self is true. I survived. Thrived. I built something beautiful from ruins. And I'm happy. Genuinely. Deeply happy in a way I wasn't even before the betrayal, because now my happiness is rooted in my own strength rather than in someone else's love for me. That's the real ending to this story. Not Adalbert's return or Lieselot's downfall or the salvation of a bloodline. But one woman discovering that she was enough all along, that she could create a beautiful life on her own terms, that betrayal couldn't break her because she was stronger than she ever knew. And a child, a beautiful, brilliant, healthy child, who grew up knowing he was wanted, loved, and valued for exactly who he is. Who understood that families come in all forms, that mistakes can be forgiven if not forgotten, that complexity doesn't negate love. Maximilian is the child who saved the von Reichenberg bloodline. But he's also the child who saved me from becoming bitter, from remaining broken, from letting one man's poor choice define the rest of my life. For that gift, for him, I will be grateful every single day for the rest of my life. This is where my story ends for now. Not with a wedding or revenge or dramatic reconciliation, but with peace. With a birthday party to plan and a child to raise and a life to live that's richer and fuller than anything I could have imagined in my darkest moments. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Thank you for understanding that healing isn't linear, that forgiveness is complicated, that strength sometimes looks like simply continuing to put one foot in front of the other when you'd rather give up. And if you're facing your own betrayal, your own heartbreak, your own impossible situation, please know this. You will survive it. You will grow from it. And one day you'll look back and realize that you're not just surviving, you're thriving. The child who saved a bloodline taught me that sometimes salvation comes from unexpected places. Sometimes the thing you think will destroy you actually transforms you into someone better, stronger, more authentic. And sometimes the greatest love story isn't about romance at all. It's about the love between a parent and child, the love you discover for yourself. The love that persists even through betrayal and pain and all the complicated messiness of being human. That's my truth. That's my testimony. That's what carrying Adalbert's child and raising him alone and eventually learning to co-parent taught me. Love persists. Strength emerges. Life continues. And bloodlines, whether genetic or spiritual, are saved not by following tradition but by having the courage to create something new. May you find your own version of that courage. May you discover your own strength in impossible circumstances. And may you always remember that your worth was never dependent on someone else choosing you. It was there all along, waiting for you to recognize it in yourself. This is Gretchen Hoffmann, mother of Maximilian, signing off. May your own story of healing be as profound and transformative as mine has been. And tell me the city you are watching from so that I can send you a hug. Because we all need reminders that we're not alone in our struggles, that others have walked similar paths and survived, that there is hope even in the darkest moments. Wherever you are, whatever you're facing, you've got this. Just like I did. Just like we all do when we dig deep enough to find the strength that's been there all along. Thank you. And goodbye for now.